Welcome to another session of Composition 2 with me, Mr. Fowler. We're here on this wonderful Monday, November 16th, to address the concerns and help students get started with the argumentative essay, the final major essay project of the semester. I've got a couple of people here who are needing to be admitted, so pardon me as I do that. And then once they're all logged in, we'll roll ahead with today's PowerPoint presentation. Of course, as always, I'll be appending these PowerPoints to the server on Desire to Learn so that you can go ahead and upload them and review them if need be. Okay, let's go ahead. I'm going to start by sharing a screen today. I'm going to share our PowerPoint. And I'm going to want to share that slideshow from the beginning. So for today, session number 26, we are going to do a little bit of a preview and then review. That shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. It's kind of encapsulating what we discussed last time with our text for the semester, The Princess Bride. So this is the last day that you'll need to have the book there or reference it. If you have fallen behind in the reading, that's okay. You have the rest of the semester to catch up and finish it if you need to. Then we're going to move ahead to today's lecture, a little bit of material about pre-writing and research, and kind of a Q&A session about just the process and how to get started in there, a little bit of a review if you need that review time. Then we'll stop the session. So only about 40 minutes today dedicated to a specific lecture and review. Then after that point in time, the remainder of the session will be given over to you in the form of an argumentative writing lab. So you can use that time to research. You can use that time to start writing. You can still hang out with me for a little bit longer if you wish, just with your questions and your question and answer session, so I can help you with that. Notice here, no written questions this week. So no threaded discussion questions for this week. There will be one more threaded discussion question in the upcoming weeks, but probably in that first week of December, we'll have one last written question to think about, but not too much more to go there. Then for next time, meaning on Wednesday for this week, we're just going to have an argument writing lab. So you won't have to attend at a specific time, but my virtual conference time, which is available for those argumentative writing labs, is going to be running and functionable from 9:30 a.m. to about 12:30 in the afternoon. So about the same time as the class runs. And then I'll need to take a break, probably for lunch or a nap or something like that. Usually it's lunch. So from 1:30 to 4:30, though, I'm going to be back on and available again for a conference. So just send me an email and let me know, and I'll set up a Zoom session. I probably won't run a Zoom session just in general, but just a quick email or a phone call, and I will set up a time with you in which we can meet and address your concerns. You may even want to pause in your writing process and have me look something over, maybe give it some grammar, polish, so on and so forth, and then I'll come back and do that again as you progress in your writing. So that's an option that's open there to you. Plus, believe it or not, I know a couple of you have already submitted some assignments. So I'll be getting to those as soon as I can and giving you some feedback, which will be to your benefit, of course. So that's our agenda in terms of preview. Before we get into the straight up review, though, Did anybody have a question or a concern that they wanted answered? Just general opening questions or concerns.
I guess I know you had mentioned that we're kind of leaning towards learning to formulate our papers without this kind of guidance, but do you have at all a structure of this paper? I'm guessing we're mainly going to use the pillars of argument, the 4 pillars of argument. And I was just thinking about how many body paragraphs. I know your last one was like 6 to 7. So I'm thinking maybe 8 to 9, or is that too much?
That's just about right, Kevin. However, those are average estimates. So rather than sticking to a hard and fast rule of 7 to 8 or 8 to 9 paragraphs per paper, I'm reticent now that we're kind of at this level to tell you how many paragraphs it should be in terms of
you had
breakdown.
mentioned that. I just figured I would ask.
But yeah, and that's fine. But you're generally in the right ballpark. It's probably between, so what? The last one was 3.5 pages. Most of you wrote 4 pretty substantive pages. And I think the average paragraph count was something like 6.5 to 7 paragraphs. So this one would probably be, I think you said 8 to 9. That sounds about right. If you had 10 or 12, shorter, because you had some shorter ones in there, or if you just felt like you had more to say, it is more difficult for me to put a hard and fast number on the amount of paragraphs in terms of the writing. That's why I try to focus on that word count. 1,250 words is a little bit better. And again, I know I'm being a bit of a broken record here, but as you move on to higher level courses at Kishwaukee, and then if you think ahead to any humanities or writing based class that you might want to take at NIU or any of your other 4-year degree universities, they're probably going to exclusively be working in numbers per paper format. I try to give students a page number reference as well, because I feel students often look at 5 pages or this one, which is 4.5, and then they think, okay, so 4.5 pages, I can wrap my brain around that, versus a larger scale number like 1,250 words that sometimes intimidates a student, or students over focus on that. I once had a student, and just as a point of clarification, they submitted their paper and right away they sent me an email. So I knew something was up, and I read the email and they said, this paper is only about 1,240 words. So they're like 10 words shy, in other words. And I said, I just can't figure out anything else to write for those 10. And okay, I probably am not going to ding you at all for lacking 10 words. If it's 1,000 words versus a 1,250 word paper, that's, you might have to take a point off or a half a point off or something like that for the overall length. But, generally speaking, that's why I always throw the page number up there also. But to return and cycle back to your original question, Kevin, yeah, if I had to guess an estimate, it would be somewhere between 8 and 10 paragraphs, but that will vary.
Okay.
Good question. Other questions, other concerns, or similar questions or clarifications?
No, I'll be okay. Thank you.
Okay. It sounds like we're good for now. If something comes up, use the hand raising emoticon and I'll stop, and we'll address those concerns as they arrive. Okay. All right, let's get into it for today. Just as review, we're going to talk about The Princess Bride and then spend some time focusing on the final essay assignment for this semester, the argument. Okay, our story thus far. Armed with Wesley's wits, Fezzik's great strength, and Inigo Montoya's steel, the three heroes storm Humperdinck's castle in order to stop the wedding, take revenge on Count Rugen, and somehow in all of that, meet up and escape. Obviously, the revenge with Count Rugen occurs about 5:37 p.m. Remember that the entire last chapter, chapter 8, is structured on this 40-minute time frame. Now, the 40-minute time frame comes from the fact that Wesley may only be able to revive himself for a period of about 40 minutes, in which they have to storm the castle and do all of these other things that are necessary to have all of the protagonists meet their needs. So this battle that begins with Count Rugen ends when Inigo's father is avenged, as the famous fencer repeats his introduction. Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die. In the midst of all this, Buttercup and Wesley are reunited. But Humperdinck lives. And in fact, he finds Wesley in the bedchamber with his intended, which, as you would imagine, evokes a pretty strong reaction. And Wesley is challenged to duel with Count Rugen to the death. And Wesley counters this with to the pain. And Rugen, this is the wrong villain here. Humperdinck is kind of thrown by this. Wesley quickly explains the. Sorry?
No, I was gonna say you'd be surprised that Humperdinck was so concerned about, caring for Buttercup in this part, just because like the whole time he wanted to kill her anyways, and now he's just mad that, she's happy, kinda.
Right. Yeah. His happiness is kind of dependent upon her unhappiness to some extent.
Yeah,
sort
for
of
real.
Bizarre. But he's challenged to the pain. And Wesley explains that they'll duel, and first he will gouge out each of his eyes and then sever all of his 4 major limbs and then cut out his tongue, leaving only his perfect ears to hear the sounds of people as they regard his deformed state. Faced with the potential for that, not even the fact that Wesley could probably do this, the potential is enough to say, all right, I think I've been done in here. I don't really want to risk that for Buttercup. It's not that important to me. I could probably find another princess to kill and frame Gilda for that. So he gives in. But he's still a menace as he is tied to a chair by Buttercup and left alive. He's able to scream and alert the brutes on the brute squad, who actually storm into the bedchamber and set him free, just as the heroes are escaping the front door. Speaking of the escape, Fezzik does something right for the first time in his, memory, in that when he tries to find Wesley, whom he leaves alone so that he can break down a door for Inigo in order to pursue Count Rugen, he returns to where Wesley was only to find him gone. We now know, of course, in the scattered time frame that Wesley has slipped into the bedchamber and reunited with Buttercup. So Fezzik chooses the wrong door, which leads him down a flight of stairs and outside to the stables, where he collects 4 of Prince Humperdinck's white stallions, and ends up outside the bedroom window where all the heroes jump onto the horses and escape. They are slowed down by the brutes who have gathered at the front gate, But Buttercup uses her authority as the princess, or the queen at this point, since she was technically married, and she tells them to depart, or the king will hold them responsible for disobeying her commands. They listen to her, drop the drawbridge, and the four heroes escape into the night. But of course, the ending seems rather satisfactory. But there's a question about that. Our characters do get what they want. Fezzik feels like a hero. Buttercup and Wesley are reunited and find true love. Inigo avenges his father. But all adventure stories and fairy tales have a double edge, and The Princess Bride is no exception. In Goldman's version, the version that he repeats and that was given to him or read to him as the good parts version by his father, the heroes, of course, are victorious. And as his father before him explained to young Billy Goldman, the heroes were victorious and they rode off into the sunset and lived happily ever after. Wesley and Buttercup were reunited. Fezzik had done something right. And there's even a potential offered by the film adaptation that maybe Inigo can fill his days and nights as a new Dread Pirate Roberts, since his quest for vengeance had driven most of his life, and that's now been fulfilled. However, Goldman doesn't let us off the hook that easily. He says that he went back and reread the original Morgenstern. And in the Morgenstern version, it's a little more ambiguous. Inigo's wound reopens due to all the rough riding on the horse. Right? He had been injured in his battle with Count Rugen. He had survived and avenged his father, but now that he's riding, his wound reopens. Buttercup's horse throws a shoe, which could probably create some havoc for the escape plans. Wesley begins to relapse a little bit. That 40 minutes of the phantasmagoria is starting to wear off, and he's starting to die again inside. And Fezzik, of course, being Fezzik, starts to take a wrong turn and peel away from the other three writers, which may have its own set of consequences. But as we said last time, there's usually a original version, which would be close to our Morgenstern adaptation, and then a more classical version, which is closer to Goldman's, right? The point being that Goldman ultimately argues life is never fair, but it is better than the alternative, of course, which is death. So now that we've sort of summarized, we are faced with this question. What is it that we should write about? Well, there are lots of options, and that's the difficult part for this paper. For those of you who are interested in The Princess Bride, and you want to either write a third paper in a series of topics about The Princess Bride, or if you just want to take the easiest possible route to get this paper done, you may want to consider the following. Option one for the Princess Bride based topics might be to revisit your analysis paper, your ad analysis paper, which originally asked you to analyze the poster of The Princess Bride. I know a couple of you took this route, so that might be something you're interested in. For this option, all you need to do is perform a simple visual search for on Pinterest or through Google Images and compare the foreign release posters for the original Princess Bride film and maybe the newer posters that came out as the film gained popularity, or some of the ad campaigns designed around it. What elements are new or different? What visual cues and images were added to the poster? And how do these changes make the new versions superior, or do they at all? Option two, this is the easiest one. Despite Goldman having written the screenplay for the adaptation of The Princess Bride, there are many differences between the adaptation and the original novel. Identify as many of those as you can at first. And ask yourself, why do you feel that Goldman made these changes? And with which of those choices do you agree? Do you think it's a good change, in other words? And with which do you disagree? What was subtracted from the original film, or which was subtracted from the film adaptation that appeared in the original novel that you disagree with? You thought, oh, it would have made quite a bit of difference, or would have helped a lot to have established those elements in the film adaptation as well. Okay. Now with this version, you also have another interesting avenue to explore. The first is that you have two resources built into this for you. The original novel is one resource, and the film adaptation is a second resource. So you have two resources designed as already implied sources. So you really only have to research two additional outside sources for your reference. So that might make the reference and research process a little bit more easy. Plus, I think that talking about this or writing about this topic would be easier on the average for most students who have been reading along and participating in the weekly discussions. So that is an option for you. Option number 3, these are the prescribed options. You could compare the relationships between men in the book and those between men and women. So for men, you've got a lot of different options. Goldman and his father is one relationship. Goldman and his son, Jason, his made-up son, Jason. Fezzik and Inigo as friends. Inigo and Domingo, that's Inigo's father. And then Goldman and, like I said, his son, Jason. And then, of course, for men and women, you've got Miracle, Max, and Valerie, but especially Wesley and Buttercup. You could also suggest or compare the relationships between, I suppose, Buttercup and Prince Humperdinck, and maybe even Count Rugen and Countess Rugen, although there's so little information given about Count Rugen and Countess Rugen and their relationship, because, like I said, Countess Rugen only appears in chapter 4, I think. And then she just disappears for the rest of the book. But in any event, which of the types of relationships, men and women or men and men, are presented more positively, and why do you think that may be the case? Lastly, it's often said that those on the path of vengeance should dig 2 graves, one for their victims and one for themselves. Reflect on that adage in relation to the character of Inigo Montoya and his quest for revenge. Does this old adage apply to him? And if so, what are the consequences? Alternatively, what does Inigo potentially miss out on as he pursues his vengeance? So those are topics that we've all discussed before in prior iterations of the class. Now, many of you have also reached out to me about potential topics, and I've either discussed them directly with you or I've emailed you a response. But if you're not interested in the Princess Bride, which is completely fine, you already wrote your one required Princess Bride paper for me in the form of an argument. I misspoke there. You've already written that in the form of the persuasive essay. So you can use this essay topic to decide on an argumentative style of topic yourself. And 2 suggestions that we made during last week's discussion were you could look at the nature of humor today and how perhaps humor is being censored or is under fire from political correctness. And you could use some of the some of Goldman's attempts at humor as a springboard to get into a larger discussion about that topic. We also discussed this idea of how the brute squad treated the citizens of that of this fictional time and place, and whether or not things like the potential abuse for power, even as they're referenced in fairy tales and stories that are more fictional, might resonate with some of the outstanding social issues that have gone on today, especially those in relationship to police brutality. So if you're not interested in The Princess Bride, there are a myriad amount of topics that you could explore for the purposes of this paper. But then you're on your own to gather sources and come up with a researchable, argumentative style of question to adopt for the purposes of this paper topic. Okay, and of course, I found this little goofy image here, which I thought was quite clever. But that's essentially a wrap on The Princess Bride. Okay. Any last questions about the text before we end on this and that particular topic? Okay. So that's just about the extent of today's session. I've got about 10 more minutes in which I wanted to either open up the discussion forum or talk just a little bit about the development of the argumentative paper itself. So before I get into the discussion of the argumentative paper itself, any additional questions or anything about The Princess Bride before we close that off?
No, I'm okay.
So for the argumentative paper, when we were starting the session, Kevin asked a really great question. He said, should we sort of base the format of the discussion on the 4 pillars of argument? And I said, yeah, that's, I think, an ideal way to go about structuring an argument. And we've studied that innumerable times over the course of the semester. So if you want to use that structure, you can. To get more specific about the structure, you could use the funnel technique or the funnel method. So for an argument, hold on. Hold on.
Could you repeat that? It was just breaking up real bad.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I got a message. So I'll.
Oh, okay. Oh, what the? Right, did I just become host?
Yeah, until it comes back, I think.
Ooh, no school. All right, Professor Devin, what do you got planned for us today?
Crap. Dang.
I'm back.
And you, yeah.
Yeah,
Welcome
sorry.
back.
The Zoom just completely crashed and came back. Good to be back. Good to be back. Yeah.
Because I was gonna have to
Now I'm
end. I
getting
was about to end the class session.
Yeah, right. I'm like, I don't want to answer this. I'm out of here. No, I apologize about that. Yeah, so like I said, a funnel type approach at the beginning might be a good way to set up this particular argument paper. And why I suggest a funnel is because of the yes, but or yes and option. I know some of you are probably familiar with this structure, but bear with me because I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So when you approach an argument, one of the best ways to do so is to ask yourself, do you agree with the assessment or perspective of another author? This is where it would be critical to spend some time either today during the rest of the session or on Wednesday, researching a source that you really think you can sink your teeth into. Because if you can say, all right, I strongly agree or I strongly disagree with this other writer, that's a good sign that that may be an article worthy of your time and your attention, because then you can frame your argument as a yes and or a yes but. So this basically acknowledges the writing of a professional essayist or author as having some merit, right? It's really difficult to find an argumentative article that's worth reviewing that doesn't have at least some good points or some good ideas offered up. That's why a yes, but is a really good option to pursue. For yes, but, what you want to do is essentially say, yes, this author has some really good points, but I think they miss an essential truth, or they ignore part of what is critically, important about this topic. As a consequence, I'm going to pursue those missed ideas or those neglected issues, and I'm going to build a response to that. And I'm going to use the other source material to support or shore up my perspective. A yes and is slightly different and probably the easier. This is an argument in which you agree with an essential point that another author offers up. Another author offers, try it again, that another author makes clear or establishes in his or her essay. Okay. But when you say yes and, you bring up or highlight things that they may have neglected or additional ideas or content that you feel they might have used or should have used to further support or bring additional relevancy to their argument. All right. So for a yes and, you can actually argue along with the perspective of another author, and a yes but is where you take issue with and argue against that author. So those are the two perspectives that I would use when I started designing my own thesis statement. Then you can use that funnel opening where you start with the broadest possible interpretation, meaning the analysis of the other author's thesis. And then you narrow that to more specific information, your thesis, in which you explain how you can either add to the argument as it's been established, or how you're going to deviate from the ideas that the other author offered up as part and parcel of their perspective. That should lead you into a specific thesis, and then from there you can expand out and talk about your points of argument. So probably between 3 to 4 points of argument. So if I'm keeping track of the number of paragraphs again, I've got one introduction with a funnel opening, and then I've got 3 to 4 pieces of evidence or suggested supports that explain my perspective. So let's say there are 3 as a minimum, and we'll be conservative. There may be as many as 4, but that would leave you with about 4 paragraphs. Then you should pause for another refutation. And remember that when you're writing a refutation, you're writing not to counterbalance your perspective, but rather you're writing instead to be considerate of the opposing viewpoint. So you want to look at and try to predict the views that would oppose your perspective and try to address as many of those as you can. In other words, this is that moment in the writing where you try to say, you have a good point, but I'm still right because of X, Y, and Z. So let's say that took another paragraph, again, conservatively. It might take as many as 2 paragraphs for a refutation. So if you're really stretching yourself, you've probably got what? Let's say an introduction, 3 to 4 points of evaluation, a couple of paragraphs for refutation, and then probably a paragraph for a conclusion. So, in a broader sense, probably about 8 paragraphs, probably about 7, a little bit more conservatively. So that would be a real basic structure for an argumentative scale essay. And if you figure 7 paragraphs spread over 4 pages, that's not too bad. If you wrote a little bit today, starting on this Monday, and you wrote 1 page this Monday and 1 page on Wednesday, and then you wrote another page next Monday, and you took the rest of that week off because Thanksgiving fell on Thursday. But then you started again and you wrote another page on November 30th. That would give you 4 pages. So if you wrote a page a day from this point on, you would be finished with your 4 to 4.5 page essay without any trouble. And that's really a good goal to set for yourself. If you wrote 1 page every day for the rest of this week, which would probably be pushing it, then I could see you conservatively being done by the end of next week. But how you budget your time and how you frame your rate of success is relatively up to you. Notice that, again, on the past paper, the persuasive essay, and on this paper, the argument, we don't have a formal revision process. You will get a chance, and this is part of what I'll talk about for Wednesday, to revise one of these 2 essays and revisit that. But from here on out, especially as you get to 200 level courses, you may have instructors who are nice enough to say, hey, I will look at a revision, or I will look at a rough draft. But that's on you to, in terms of when you want to turn it in and how you want to submit the papers. You may also run into papers in other classes at the 200 and beyond level where they ask you to make a choice to write 2 short papers, 1 near the beginning of the semester due at the midterm and 1 due at the end, about a variety of topics that you've discussed in the class, or 1 long paper of 20 pages. Okay. So I always took the saner of what I found those 2 options to be. I could write a couple of, 5 or 6 page papers real easily, whereas I didn't relish the idea of writing 1 long paper of like 10 to 12 pages. And as you advance, it could be up to almost 15 to 20 pages by the time you completed a particular semester. Maybe just 1 paper of that length, though. There are all sorts of options that will change as you advance. But since this is the end of the base level, 104 is kind of the terminus point for early composition. I think it's appropriate to have a safety net for at least one of these 2 final essays. And we'll talk some more about the safety net and the final revision on Wednesday. But that's a general general thoughts, ideas, reflections on the format of the argumentative essay and how you might begin to structure that. Now, I still have some of those same development activities. I have an outline. I have some pre-writing strategies that you can bounce around in your head. Of course, some of the pre-writing that has taken place in the weekly discussion questions have been attempts to prime you to get ready and think about how to apply some of these topics for a paper. So if you've been working on those, you probably already could go back and prime your paper by going back to your own response. I had a student who actually it was a very intelligent question. They said, I've written about, this was for the persuasive paper, I've written about these topics in the discussion forum questions. Can I go back and use the question prompt in my response as an introduction? And I said, of course, that's what they're initially intended for. And they did a nice job. So if you're still struggling for a topic, one other suggestion I might make is to go back and reread the questions from the weekly discussion and reread your response and see if you're particularly engaged with or had a very good response to some of those questions, and use that as the basis of forming a larger scale paper. That's another bit of food for thought as you get ready to approach this final topic. Okay, I've said just about all I want to say. I've been talking way too much for today's session. But before I wrap up completely, I want to pause again to see if there are other questions I can answer or concerns that you might raise that other students have. And you can either use that hand emoticon or type it into the chat discussion if you'd prefer me to respond to a question in private. But this next few minutes is yours.
I'm good. Anyone else got any questions?
Nothing much really. Other than how was you guys this weekend?
How many sources do we need?
Time stops.
I think he said 4.
That was a great question. Yeah. I recommend 4 topics, or rather 4 sources, only because on the average, that's about 1 less per number of pages that you might need to write about in total for the paper. So like I said, 1,000 pages is about 4, or 1,000 words is about 4 pages. So 1,250 is roughly 5 pages. And if you use at least 4 sources, that should give you enough information to cover the gamut of pages without overwhelming your reader with information from other authors. So in other words, there's enough space for you to make a good argument and bring in support without letting the other material overwhelm what it is you have to say. So 4. Yeah. Great question. Always good to get that clear. And in my other class, I actually had a student write into me today, and he was confused because there were some errors on the assignment rubric. Just so you know what I'm talking about. I shared this earlier, but there were some errors on this document, and he called me out on it, and I went into that class, which is different from our class meeting, and I had not uploaded this form, so I did that this morning and forwarded him the better version. So yeah, you can turn it in early, but it's not due until Friday, December 4th, which is the last full week of classes. Now, be cautious here. I don't want my verbiage to confuse you as a student. We will have a final week after this. So the 5th would be that Friday, the 6th would be that Sunday, I believe the 7th is that next Monday. So the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th. The 7th through the 11th is finals week. So don't assume that your other classes are over just because this one will be done on the 4th. Okay. We will have finals week after that. And your other classes may be setting up tests or quizzes or something like that to be completed before you walk away from the semester. Grades are due on the 12th, which is that Saturday. So they should be published by the following Monday, which would be the 14th, I think. But the semester should be done the week after the 4th. And in this class, you'll probably be done that Friday because it'll only take the majority of that weekend for me to grade the papers. Which means you'll probably have your projected course grade on or about the 6th.
But when are we doing the review paper that you were talking about, where we take one of the two and not review, finalize
Mhm.
division?
That will depend on your particular work ethic, but it would be due then the 11th
Oh, okay.
because it's just a revision of one of those two papers.
Cool.
I want you to be able to have the whole gamut of your papers available so you can choose which of the two you'd like to revise. But it's just a revision and you can submit it. Great question, Kevin. And we'll talk about that more on Wednesday during that half session as well. So I'll bring that up and we can clarify that and you can see all the bells and whistles for that.
Sounds good.
Okay. Any other questions? Sorry, I thought I stepped over something someone was going to say. All right, well, that's it for Mr. Fowler for today. I have a couple of questions from some students that they would like me to answer in the chat or in private. So I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to say thank you for your time and your attention today. You tuning in, and be sure to contact me if you've got questions or concerns as they relate to the research and writing phase. Until next time, this is Mr. Fowler signing off. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. You too.
You too,
See
sir.
you, everybody.
All had a great weekend.